All right, hi guys. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Line Wobbler today. I don't know, I can make it a bit more technical or less technical in terms of code, but it's going to be fairly light on super hardcore stuff, I think. So I'm going to talk a bit about the brief history of wobbling. And then I go into some details, and also because I've now made a couple more, so it's going to be a bit about manufacturing stuff, about technology, like what I used, and it's not too much things I used, so it's not going to be too long. And then about exhibitions as well, so where I've shown it and how to show it, although that's kind of super specific for projects, you know, so it's all very limited advice, I think. But yeah, let's go into it. And then most of the slides are mostly going to be photos, and I'm going to talk over them. Well, the game was made at the Exile Game Jam in Denmark, as you can almost see on the slide, in October 2014, so that was like 2 years ago almost. And it was a really nice game jam in the Danish countryside. There's people playing. This is the first version of the game after 2.5 days or so. And yeah, this is what the jam looks like. It was like nice and camping and fire. It was good. It was really nice. So it's like a relaxed environment. Really helps, I think, to create cool things. And yeah, let's go right into the deep end, I think. Oh shit, this doesn't quite fit. Let me see if I just go out of the display mode. No. This was better already, right? So full screen is shit? Oh, okay. Well, ignore all my tabs, please. So the hardware is an Arduino, and I use a specific Arduino, which is called the Teensy, which is kind of not an original Arduino. It's made in the States, and the advantage of it is it's much faster than a normal Arduino. So it runs at 96 megahertz, and the reason why I used it is because I really wanted to focus on a kind of a really low lag, high performance game. So I wanted to have a really high frame rate, as if you can speak about frames in a 1D game. So the game usually runs at around 120 to 150 frames per second, which is really cool for these kind of vivid explosions you get. And so this Teensy chip really helps with that. So it has some other really cool features, but I mean, I guess that gets very technical very quickly. But one of them, for example, is a true analog output. So normal Arduinos can only do like on and off signals, or really fast on and off signals. But this one can also do proper sine waves. So that's really good for the sound. Although I probably wouldn't even have needed it for this project because the sound is very kind of crunchy and lo-fi, and probably can fake it with some cheaper parts as well. And in the foreground, you can see the accelerometer. It's like this thing. And that sits in the top of the spring, so like on top of those. Actually, I can point with the mouse, right? Yeah. So these are door stopper springs, and I go into the details of the springs in a bit as well. There's like the type numbers of the type pieces I use. They're not super important, but if you want to build it. The accelerometer is like super cheap. It's like $2, and that's it's MPU 6050. And it's like if you type Arduino MPU 6050, there's so much example code and like how to wire it up. It's super easy. Yeah, then the LED strips are, there's like two types you can use. There's NeoPixels, which are the most common ones. Actually, how many people have you heard of NeoPixels? Not too many. Okay, so they're addressable LED strips. So they look like normal LED strips, like here in the background. Can you see the mouse? Yeah. But they are individually addressable, so you can talk to each pixel separately. And that sounds very complicated, but there's a library for Arduino, which makes it super easy. So actually, maybe we can just jump into the code right away. So this is a code. It's spaghetti code because it was a game jam project, so it's like lots of lines. But there is one function called setPixel. And well, there's not now a lot of things, like if there's a dead pixel. But the pixel you said actually just you say, okay, it's an LED array, and you say which position and then the color, and that's it. So you have an array of colors, a list of colors basically, and you send that to the string. And the string will take care of where it is and how long it is, whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, obviously you need to kind of somewhere know in the game how long this strip is, otherwise it runs over or under. But in theory, you can attach these strips to each other to make it as long as possible, or as long as you want. It's just the refresh rate will go down and you have issues with power supply. But I once made a 20-meter version, which was quite fun. But it's super difficult also because I don't have an electronics background, so I just come from the programming side. And then you need to worry about like noise in wires. And I have never dealt with noise. So suddenly they would start flickering. I said, shit, what's going on? But yeah, you need to kind of have shielding in the wires, and then shielding needs to be properly grounded, and but only on one side. So it's like a rabbit hole you go down very quickly if you do these kind of bigger projects. And it's quite fun to do. For me, it's quite a different experience from just sitting on the computer and coding, like figuring out these weird problems. Like you think as a coder, if the wire is connected from here to here, then it's connected. But no. So like if the wire is too long, or if the wire is connected like close to another wire, then it doesn't work. So it's a lot of issues, and figuring these out is good. It's a bit difficult, but if you have good support, like in a hack space, for example, then that becomes easy as well. Especially with the Arduino, things have become so easy. Like I spoke to a lot of people that have been into hardware for years, and back then you had to make everything yourself, like analog hardware with like little transistors and capacitors, and like all these things you can see on the screen now is like what is required to build 5 line wobblers. So there's not a lot of things going on. So it's like basically the Arduino takes care of everything, and then you needed some resistors for the wires, because when they get longer they have issues. So let's go to the springs. So the springs are kind of probably the most self-made part in a way, because the controller didn't really exist. So it's I went through a series of different spring types, and on the top there is a 3D printed knob, basically, where the accelerometer sits in. So you can see it actually from here. It's like this little gap for the accelerometer, and it sits in there. And that was like basically from day one. So at the game jam, someone brought, or like Tim actually brought, the organizer brought a 3D printer. So that's when I learned 3D printing at the jam. So it was cool. I was like, someone gave a workshop just on the day before. Hey, learn about 3D printing. And it turns out it's fairly easy. I don't know. Yeah, so that slide. So this is like the inside of the knob. So I don't know. Wait, actually, maybe I can. This is now the actual program. So I can spin it. So you can see it's basically just a cylinder. And in this program, this is called Design Spark Mechanical, which is free. And I hadn't used it before. So it's very simple to use. I don't know if I can manage now live, but you can basically kind of just pull up things and pull down things, although maybe it just froze. I don't know. Yeah, you can adjust, for example, how round it is. So you can make it nice and super round, like an RTD2 controller. So it's very simple to use, and you can just define, how wide it is. You can just say, radius 14 millimeters. I wanted 15 or something. And then it's just wider, right? So it's super simple. And then the inside, go away, is basically just space for this chip. And then I have this hole here, which is a hole for a screw. And that I figured out only after a while, because people would kind of try to figure out when they can play the game, how to play it. So they would pull and twist. And when they twist, then the orientation of the accelerometer changes. And that is actually when, because like in the accelerometer, like one direction is forward, right? So I define it in code. But if it's suddenly twisted, then people will try to bend it forward and nothing happens. So that was a big issue at first, because I tried it with glue and it wasn't strong enough because the metal would twist out. So finally figured out you can just put a screw in between the bends of the spring. And I have a video about that in a bit. Here we go. No, wait, this is fake, yes. So here's one 3D printed. I use NinjaFlex, which is a soft 3D printing material, which is really cool. It's a bit harder to use, but at your local hack space or a maker space or whatever, they will teach you how to do it, probably. It's a fairly new material, but it's becoming more popular. And it's soft, so you can squeeze the knob, and so people don't hurt themselves, which they did in the first version. So they would complain when they play too strongly that it would smack their hands, which is actually quite nice as well, but I decided to go for a milder version at first. So this is I think this was the first version. I'm not quite sure. So this was the spring I used is a shoe tree spring, Schuhspanner in German. It's used for leather shoes. So it's really not well known. Most people don't know it. I think I've seen it only at my grandparents' place, and this is actually my grandma's here, which I used. So it's just that you can see the bottom is still the same, and the top I used the wooden bit for a while as well, but this is now the 3D printed version. Oh yeah, this is the inspiration. It's a video. I don't know if you've seen it before. This is the inspiration for the controller, which I had before the jam. And it's a cat video, obviously. So as I do research online, I found this video, and it's really nice. Oh, there's also sound. So yeah, so the cat has fun playing this thing, and I said, wow, this is cool. If a cat can play it, you know, and is clearly enjoying it, then, and it sounds really great, right? So I'm still working on that sound. So now the springs are bigger, so they go a bit slower. So it's not quite as snappy anymore. So I want to get back to that. Maybe I have to reduce the size. But yeah, sorry. And so, yeah, so that was the inspiration, and thought, okay, how do I get the sensor to sense how it bends? And I had bend sensors at first, like these, you know, little strips, but they wouldn't work because they can't bend left and right. And then maybe a joystick in the bottom, but then if you twist the top, it wouldn't work. So in the end, I arrived at the accelerometers, which you have already seen. And so here's like four doorstopper springs, not doorstopper springs, sorry, like the shoe tree springs, so 2 more from a flea market. And that was also the problem actually with those, because they are hard to get reliably. So I looked on Amazon, but they're all like plastic and kind of break. And like good wooden ones are harder to find. And then also, even with the wooden ones, it's kind of a pain to attach them to anything, right? So I drilled these holes in them and had these wooden boards, which I then used the vise to attach them to a table, which is not really great. One good thing is you can adjust the lengths here, like so you can make it shorter, longer, so you can experiment with different frequencies, basically, of wobbling. Yeah, right now, I don't know if you've played it recently, there's one out at SOS Fire Truck, maybe tonight again. It's a bit slower, so it's not quite as perfect. So the second iteration was doorstopper springs, like from the original inspiration, actually. So these like 10 or something, which I made. So they worked well, but the problem was they're much smaller, right? So and smaller is springier, but they're also flimsier. So especially when kids play it or drunk people, we have a problem. So they would last, like I had it to some exhibitions where they would last 1 day. And then especially the lower coils would kind of bend out and break. So that's kind of shit. So I used them for a while because they were easy to get, like 50p or something. The best ones are American ones because everything's bigger in America. So they were bigger doorstopper springs. Bought them from, was it Walmart? No, it wasn't Walmart. Some supermarket chain, I don't know. But yeah, so whenever I would go to America, I would go on a supply run. But so in the end, it wouldn't quite work because they weren't sturdy enough. And then also, like the wire would catch inside, and I would need to drill through the base because the base is all metal, right? To get the wire through. And then sometimes the edge of the metal would be sharp, so it would kind of de-insulate itself and break. So the next step was to make my own springs. So I went to a spring factory in London. And it was like such a particular factory. It's so weird. It's called a Small Order Springs and Fittings Limited. So not only do they only do springs, but they also do small orders only, right? So if you want a lot of springs, you're out of luck. So I have a video of. So I went to them, and they were actually quite confused at first what I wanted. You know, I go to game controller. So but then they quickly warmed up. So I brought the old copy and said, "Wow, this is actually quite cool." And then they told me about different diameters and diameter. Like steel diameter to overall spring diameter ratios, and that's kind of important, apparently. So there's a lot of things to know about these springs. And I have 3 videos, 4. Spring nerds, yeah. So this is a spring factory. So this is like where the steel comes from, and it's fed into this cool machine here, and goes through there. You can see me in the reflection. It's a cool Christmas jumper. It was just after Christmas. And then it comes out in front, and it cuts off. And then the new one comes out, if I focus. Yep. No, focus. Yes. And then, so I came up with a design myself. So I just needed to tell them, I want like this diameter and a bit smaller on the front, and then the base maybe something bigger, so I can attach it to a wooden base. And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. And they made it. And so this is kind of how it's done. And I have one from the front. Front side detail is maybe quite nice. So they have this kind of weird blade in there, which kind of determines the diameter of the spring. And it's just kind of made it into a spiral on the spot. Quite interesting. And then it reduces the diameter right now. There you go. This is for the knob to fit on. And then there's this knife coming down. Cuts it off. Quite cool. I hadn't been to a spring factory before. I didn't know they existed. Well, I mean, I guess they have to, but... And so actually this was interesting because like it was quite expensive for what it was. So I paid 200 pounds for 50 springs. But most of that cost is in the upfront cost. So it's not actually too much. But like I ordered like 10 springs before just to test it, and they were 90 pounds. So it's like the upfront cost is high because they have this this computer which I need to program with the diameters and so on. And that takes a while, apparently. That's the same thing again from the... Oh yeah, here's like a wider view. So the computer is actually here. You can see it there behind his head. Yeah. And it has... I haven't looked into the interface too much, but it didn't look very intuitive. But it's just like, I think they put different diameters and different times. And then if I had ordered more, they would have done everything mechanical, but the last step where they put the little gap in the springs was they made manual because I only ordered 50, so you just do it by hand. So you can see they have this tool here. And that's why they put the gap. And the gap is for the screw to go in. So that, you know, the screw hole I mentioned earlier, that's kind of where it goes. So they make a gap of one coil is a bit wider. And that's actually enough. When the screw touches that, it's enough to not move, like twist anymore. So yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, now I have these 50 springs lying around. And so I made a few bases, and this is what it looks like now. Well, this is one I made specially for Toronto. So there was a special exhibition in Toronto, and I think they saw the game at GDC, and said, "Hey, cool, we want to have 4 of them." Or like, I think they installed 3. But it's for 7 weeks, so I only shown it for like 2 days before in a row. So I was super nervous about how long it would last. So we separated the base from the rest of the box. And so yeah, and there's the box now. You can barely see, like there's the gap for in the bottom is like a hole for the spiral thing to go in, and then just sits on top. So that's fairly simple to do. Oh yeah, so maybe just briefly about the case. The case is laser cut. That is super easy as well. So there's like a thing called, like I use Inkscape for that. If you have access to a laser cutter, then it's super quick to make a box. I can show you. So there's extensions. I think you probably need to download this one. Like it's Tab Box Maker, and you can specify which size. And this is actually like that's the Line Wobbler size. So 10 by 10 centimeters, 41 millimeters high, and then you have to specify the material thickness. Click Apply, and then you have this box. And so you can add holes into the box and by kind of dragging triangles, not triangles, squares or whatever. And you need to give them. Actually, it's already done, right? So now you have like this this hole here. And then if you send this file to the laser cutter, it'll cut along all the lines. So it's done. So that's super simple. I mean, you need to the access to the laser cutter is a bit the hard part, but I think in Berlin they have the Fab Lab. In London they have the Makerspace, and it's quite nice. You need to get the acrylic, and then engraving works the same way. It's just you reduce the power of the laser. It's fun. This is what the parts look like separately. But yeah, I mean, I talked about most of them already. So there's I made a little kind of circuit board here, but it's mostly just to break out all the functions from the Teensy. So like, you know, I made a little connector for the wobbler and a little 3 millimeter audio output. You can talk about the audio quickly, especially with this image. So there's like this speaker in here, and it's speakers were kind of tricky to find. I mean, I just Googled for cheap speakers. And the best ones I found were like these little speakers you use for mobile phones, and you use those, and then you can attach them right away to the Teensy. You just need one capacitor somewhere in between, which someone online told me. And then yeah, if you output a signal, it comes out as a sound if it's the right frequency, and that's it. So that's kind of cool. But then there's like some effects that happen like kind of coincidentally or by accident with the speakers. So for example, like especially if the spring is attached to the box directly, then when the speaker's on, you can feel it through the spring. So especially if you're going slow, it goes brrr, and you feel that through the speaker. And a lot of people commented actually, oh wow, this feels cool. There's vibration feedback in the controller. And it was totally coincidental. But then I decided, okay, this is cool. I want to kind of work more on that, make the speaker closer to the spring maybe, or kind of reinforce that. And that's where the 41 millimeter comes from in the document here, in the height of the box, because this is exactly the height of the speaker that I used. So it kind of squeezes into the box, so it optimally transfers everything to the spring. So in the next iteration, maybe I use a speaker and make it attach it directly to the spring, but I haven't figured that out. Maybe a subwoofer would be nice as well. Yeah, okay, next up. Oh, yeah, printed circuit boards. So the next step was, because this was getting a bit slow, like all this soldering here. It wasn't too bad, but it took like maybe 3-4 hours per wobbler. And that was in now I'm in the step where I want to make more of them. So how do we make this quicker? And I decided, okay, I want to learn about printed circuit boards. So I looked into printed circuit boards. That is not quite as intuitive. So all the software that is in use, most famous one is called Eagle. And that is not really, that's a kind of an old software, right? So everything is kind of done half by command line commands and half by weird icons that are not descriptive. So first you make this schematic, which you might have seen like from weird blueprints. But it's like on the right, there's a teensy, and it has all the outputs, but they're all on one side suddenly. But it doesn't matter, because this layout isn't kind of one-to-one to what will be kind of printed later. That is just kind of a schematic where things go. So you can see these JP. These are the connectors, and then yeah, there's not much else on this schematic. There's like some resistors. And then you have to click a button in this program, and it'll do this layout. But at first, it'll look much worse than this. So you have to drag around all these things. There's like a little mini game actually to kind of figure out how to lay it out that there's at least kind of overlaps, because you need to kind of route all these blue. Can you see? Yeah. All these blue solder lines basically, and it can do it mostly automatically, but sometimes you want to help it. And yeah, you can see the inscription. So like on the right, there's the wobble connector, then there's a big audio jack in the bottom right, and a USB port. The USB is just for charging the speaker, because all these speakers come with a USB charger. So I said, okay, I'll just put a USB port so it's easy to keep them charged, because you don't want them to run out of battery while you play the game. That's silly. And the 5 volts is supplied by the teensy itself, and the LED strips also run on 5 volts. So it's all the same voltage, so it's easy to do. And that's what they look like here on the hand. They're actually fairly small, much smaller than I expected, but they work. I ordered only 10. That was 100 pounds, so not that cheap for 10. But it was also because there's like this upfront cost again. So they need to kind of print the screens or something. I don't really know much about it yet, but that costs like 40 pounds. And then if you don't change the layout, there's like these 40 pounds you never have to pay again. So you can just order more, and it's much cheaper. But I'm going to change it again, I think. So I have to pay it again. Yeah, so that's what it looks like. I mean, you've probably seen it. Next up, is this a video? Probably. Oh, it's just like a little video of like places where I've shown it. So this was also a very early version where I didn't have the 5 meter long LED strips yet, because actually you can only buy them like directly from China. Because mostly they sell them shorter, especially in this high density that I use. So it's the highest density you can find. So like 144 pixels per meter. And so I only had these 1 meter long LED strips. So this is kind of, it was like set up, just kind of attached to each other. This is actually in South Africa, so Amaze Johannesburg. This is in Cluj, in Romania. So actually an electronic music festival. That was very nice. They had cool lighting. So it was like blue. And this is in London, I think. Yeah. So events, let's go to events. So you can show them at more, like if you make a game, like a hardware game, there's much more events to show than just game events, which I only now slowly discovering. So I focused entirely on game events first, so like GDC. Sorry about the bullet points. I kind of ran out of photos. So these are the game events I've shown it at, most of them. So Alt Control GDC is, I think, by far the most important if you have alternative controllers. It's like every year now, and you apply, and hopefully you get in. They select 20 pieces. I don't know if you're planning to do it. I have some tips. Don't make something big because they're space limited, so they get a lot of big applications where like swings or I don't know, something where you have to like jump around. and they can only accommodate 1 or 2 of those, so chances are slim. And also, so John Paulson is running it, and he said he likes controllers that are not game specific, but like, it's a controller, but you can use it for several games, for example, right? So these are nice, but I mean, like, game specific ones work just as well. Then connected to that is the experimental gameplay workshop, which is also at GDC in San Francisco, which is even more selective, so it's very slim chances to get in there. But it's free to apply, so it's just like a Google spreadsheet you have to fill out. And it's a very nice session. It's very big. It's like 500 people watching you explain your game. It's very, yeah, you get lamp fever, or was it like a stage fright? But it's cool. So yeah, actually, when I showed it at GDC at the experimental gameplay workshop, Tim Schafer played it. So that was kind of my fanboy moment, right? So, and he's got a copy now of the game as well. So I sent it to him right after. Well, not quite right after, but yeah. So that's kind of cool to get it out there and for people to notice, because otherwise people might not notice at all. And and it's especially hard for hardware games because there's no online store really. So Twitter works, I guess. Then there's a couple others. Fantastic Arcade is in the States. It's quite nice. I haven't been myself because I couldn't afford it. Maybe next year, I don't know. Indicate is cool, but it's very hard to get in. Especially, I mean, so Line Wobbler got in, but it was only because some judges played it before, coincidentally, in Berlin and GDC. So it's all kind of a bit dodgy. If you make a thing and no one has seen it, then probably it's going to be hard to get there. Then these are UK-centric events because I live in London right now. So it's EGX, Eurogamer Expo, and David Hayward is running them, and he's very keen on getting weird controllers in, especially edgy weird controllers. So last year I made a game called Knife to Meet You, which has an actual French kitchen knife on a motor, and you have to press buttons and kind of not get hit. Very good. I was very surprised they selected it because health and safety and so on, but it was fun. Well, it's set up so it doesn't quite cut, right? So no one has ever, no one was bleeding ever, which would be a big problem as well, I guess, because health, it's actually dangerous. But yeah, so things like kind of that push the envelope really far, like might go on the wrong end of a cool game. That is kind of a thing they look out for. Although if it's too dangerous, obviously they can't select it. Amaze, of course. And there's parties as well. There's probably way more parties, but I know these two. Wild Rumpus is very cool. It's in London and San Francisco. They're very selective as well. Bit Bash in Chicago. It's just a small one. It's fairly big as well in Chicago. It's also very cool. And then there's more general art events. I will show you a video from Rome. So I showed it in the Maker Faire in Rome, which is the biggest in Europe, which is quite fun. And I thought it was like just nerds there and geeks, but it was full of kids. It was crazy. And they all speak Italian, and I don't speak Italian. And Italian kids are rough, so it was a good stress test. So this is one. But I'm super excited. It's so fun. Look at them. Oh. That's so good. Showing things there is amazing. I needed to ask a friend to print Italian instructions, but otherwise it was fun. So that's cool. I mean, it's like you can see the setup is also super impromptu. They gave me like a small table, but then I run it up the tent on the outside. But no, no one cares. It doesn't matter. So that's cool. There's general art events, and I only know very few of those. So this is not an exhaustive list by far. So the Zealous X is very small. You probably have never heard of it. It's in London, and they just contacted me. So I said, all right, sure. And it's quite interesting to go to these events that are not game-specific because you get different kind of insight on, for example, what your game is. So a lot of people said I shouldn't see it as a game or more like an art object. And especially if I try to sell it somewhere, people say, yeah, no, you should charge much more for it. It's like an art object and so on. And I have to kind of figure out if I really want to go that route or not. But actually, it's fairly expensive to make each Line Wobbler. So at the moment, it costs about 500 euros for each one to be made. That's including labor. But I'm trying to get it cheaper, especially with the printed circuit boards and pre-producing some parts. But 500 euros is a large number, especially if you want to get it to consumers. So Xbox is cheaper and has more games, probably less one-dimensional games. But yeah, so what do I do with a game? So that's kind of still an open question, and I haven't figured it out entirely. But like going this art route is one way to go it, and then the other way, like trying to get it to consumers, is still open to me eventually. But I probably need to go to China or via Kickstarter, and that's not things I'm interested in at the moment because there's so much bureaucracy and kind of spamming media involved, which I'm not really keen on. There's some light festivals, which is kind of interesting to me as a light-based game. There is game and art spaces, which are very interesting. There's two in Berlin here, Game Science Center and Computerspiele Museum. Especially the Game Science Center has been very good. They picked up Line Wobbler on day one, basically, and it's been there ever since. It's an amazing way to test your games of strengths, and it breaks all the time. They're a bit upset, but they still have it, so not too upset, probably. There's a couple other ones, also like just UK-centric again, because I know those guys. Novelty Automation is like a arcade, but weird. And the National Video Game Arcade is in Nottingham. It's a kind of a cool space that has lots of games. And I haven't been to the last one. I just found it in my notes. Someone recommended it to me. La Gaîté Lyrique, Paris. Do you know it, Leon? Yeah. Okay. Like that. There's other events as well. There's agencies apparently, but I've never talked to them, which kind of do event handling, and they look for weird games as well. There's 2-Bit Circus, and there's a few others, but I don't know them. There's music events. The Clujotronic was one. I only been to Clujotronic because Torsten is organizing the game side of that, and that's how I got into it. Fusion Festival I haven't been to, but people say, oh, that would be ideal. You know, everyone's on drugs. Wow. It was the game was actually at Burning Man as well, so that was cool. But it was super expensive to go. If you're interested in Burning Man, it's nice, but it's so expensive. It's crazy. And it's very American-centric as well. You see, the Americans, they don't have so much freedom like we have. Like they don't see naked people, or I don't know. So they go, wow, this is mind-blowing. And so it's nice, but yeah, spend a lot of money on that. So it's kids events as well. So the Digi Play Spaces in Toronto is cool. That is it's just like another curated event. This runs for 7 weeks. I've got a little video of that, I think. Yeah. I don't know if the sound. So this is the first time I showed several at once. That was quite nice because they had like proper professional installation stuff. So they had a laser level. So all the LED strips are straight, and I think it was the first time they're straight. That's cool, you know, a lot of kids. There's 3 of them installed there, and they're still running mostly. Apparently one problem they have is the knobs, the 3D printed knobs. They get, from the sweat, they decompose slowly. I don't know, I haven't seen a photo, but they say it's kind of bad. Because I think the 3D printing material is just cornstarch or something. So it's a natural product, so it will, under humid conditions, it will just get destroyed. So I guess, yeah, sweat will do that, you know, salty and acid. And I think they clean them with alcohol as well. I don't know how good that is. Yeah, but otherwise they seem to work, so the springs are still fine, hopefully. So there. Marketing, I don't know. So I guess it's similar to normal indie games in the sense that it's like if you don't have a good game, it's very hard to get noticed, and it's the same for alternative control stuff. So I've made a few other alternative controllers before Line Wobbler, and it's kind of interesting to see people go and they test it and they say, aha, nice, and then they go to the next one. Then, you know, okay, shit. So I don't know, so Line Wobbler was kind of better received, but it definitely wasn't kind of planned better or something, so it was kind of coincidence. So it's very hard to plan ahead for these things. I guess the space is less congested because less people do it. So Alt Control GDC is like, it's like basically, you know, selection of almost all those games. Well, a small selection as well, but there's not as many. But it makes sense, I guess, because there's also no marketplace, so you can't sell them really. And you need, yeah, you have more reliance of festivals and word of mouth. So yeah, showing at those, especially at Alt Control GDC, it doesn't matter who you are; they just select the best projects. So that's quite nice. While for most other indie games, it's like a big name pull as well. You know, like if Jonathan Blow makes a new game, everyone will play it, no matter. Although Witness was great. Yeah, some more images. This was in Chicago. This is Burning Man, actually. Yeah. So that's what the people there look like. So what's cool? There's a very small camp. So a few people played it, but most people just walked by because it's not obvious. And there's very few other games there. It's like very little game stuff going on at Burning Man, it turns out. They had one which was cool. We had a fire thing where they had fire Tetris. It was like a massive wall of pyrotechnics, and they would switch them on so it looked like Tetris, and you could actually play it. That was nice. Yeah, and apparently it's nice to see on acid, the game. That's what they told me. Yeah, so that was cool, and I think, oh, this is boring. Oh yeah, so a bit in the future, but there's not too much here. I've been talking to the people at the CN Tower, which would be very interesting. Because they have an interactive, They have an interactive light thing going on, but their system is super archaic. So I got a, I don't know if it's ND8, but they like how it works is they have like a massive PNG and they read it by row. So each row is then the color that will appear on the tower. And I don't know what the refresh rate is. I think it's fairly low. I haven't actually looked. They have like a 100-side document that they send. But I mean, we haven't really started talking yet, so it's just like someone sent the document. So maybe that works, but we need to do a really good pitch. And apparently the people are really conservative, so I don't know if they like games. But that would be really cool. I want to have it on like a massive building. That would be really nice. So scale it up. And then I want to do some modifications. So, or I want to have it in arcades as well, so I'm going to build an arcade machine. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it could be the world's slimmest arcade machine, because it's very narrow. And this might be a good marketing strategy anyway, because I think most arcades are limited by space, not by cost. So like they can only fit so many in, but if there's like so much space between them, they just slot it in, and then it goes up. So I've been talking to one arcade maker in Chicago, and he said, oh yeah, this is cool, but maybe as an installation thing. So they have these air vents on the top, these big pipes. I said, it would be cool if you had an LED strip on there and then have the controller somewhere on the bottom. So it's probably like a custom installation kind of thing, which I was thinking of going towards anyway. So it's kind of interesting to see if people like it. And so it seems like there is some space for that. There's also actually a few other indies that also made arcade machines. So there is like the Killer Queen game, which is a 10-player arcade cabinet, which is like a massive thing. And that's fairly cool. And they are also successful selling it, I think. I haven't really talked to them too much, but sometimes companies buy those games for their employees, like massive ones, massive companies. I don't know if any, I don't know any names, but I could well imagine Google buying one and putting it in, like one of their cafeterias. Okay, yeah. And there's another game which I've seen in Chicago, which is like a VEC 9. I don't know if you heard of it. It's only one in existence because they use an actual tank controller, like from a Russian tank, like a massive joystick. And it's super heavy. It feels so good. It's like, I think it's, what's it called? Gusseisen? Well, it's like cast iron, yeah. So it's like super heavy, and it feels so chunky, so nice. But it's very hard to make a copy of that. Okay, and then, I don't know, maybe I make a multiplayer version or something. So I kind of want to play around with it more, even though the game itself is kind of finished, and then see if I can sell them somehow. But that's it. Thank you. Oh yeah, slides are all online on that link. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yeah. Can you touch a bit on the power supply? Okay, yeah, so the power supply. Yeah, so that's actually quite interesting with the LED strips, and that's also a thing I needed to learn, not quite the hard way, but it took a while. What's a good picture? Oh, here. Yeah, so the LED strips are quite power hungry. Especially the ones I use, so these ones on the right. This is a 144 pixel per meter strip, and it has 5 meters, so it's 720 pixels. And each pixel takes 60 milliamps at most. So that sounds little, but if you actually multiply the numbers, it's 40 amps, which I don't know how much you all know about electronics. Is a lot. It's not a lot, but it's quite a bit. And so I kind of played around with it. So this power supply has 10 amps, which is still a fair bit, but not enough to light all the LEDs. And then you also get these weird issues, like if you have a long LED strip like this with so many LEDs, the voltage over the strip will drop after a while, right? So they will kind of decrease as you use the power. And that means like towards the end, the LED strip will turn orange because it turns out the blue and green LEDs need more power. So the end ones don't. So actually you can see that at Sauce's fire truck tonight, because I modified the game a bit to be brighter. But it turns out it's too bright now, so in the end it'll turn orange when it's using super brightness. So that kind of, you need to take that into account when I make the game anyway. So like, everything is usually fairly dark in the game, and then if there's a bright element, I have to make sure it's not too white. So the power supply, yeah, I use like these ones. I buy them from eBay. They're not, I don't know how safe they are. I think usually for those ones you need a case, because like here is that's just the mains voltage. So you could touch it. Now I use these black and closed ones. They look like laptop power supplies. But the most I found there is 10 amps. But that seems to be enough for Line Wobbler, so it's cool. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, that's it. Can go in the sun. Thanks.